Sales data is the only data that matters because the purpose of business is to make money. That is absolutely not true, and I'm going to talk you through why that is. Hello and welcome to Engage and Thrive, also known as EAT, your coffee catch-up with me, your host, Taelon, where we will go through common problems and hurdles that come up in business, marketing and advertising and try and demystify them. I know firsthand how complicated and confusing it can seem with all the different acronyms and all the things to do in business. So let me try and help you be better in business. First things first, let's start with grabbing a coffee. Right, so the reality is that sales data only provides one part of the story. It doesn't give you the overview of your business health, and it's not a long-term success plan for you. If you're only looking at the sale, you're really only looking at the end part of the journey, and you're not understanding the bigger picture, how long things take, and it's very short-sighted in terms of understanding how you dial things up and down and what things cost, what works, what doesn't, and everything else included. As always, let's cover off vocab. So the first one that would come up in the context of understanding your business data is CAC, customer acquisition cost. So essentially, what is the cost to acquire a new customer? And I covered this off in a previous episode, which I will link in the show notes, how you actually do this calculation. The next one is CLTV, so customer lifetime value, the total value that customer brings to your business over the time they're with you, they're part of you, they have a relationship with you. The next one is burn rate, so the rate at which a business spends cash reserves before generating positive cash flow. So even as a established business, you could essentially say you have a burn rate, because if you have some peaks and troughs in your business, it's understanding how long you have left to survive. So if you had no sales of services, product, whatever your business is, how long could you still be in business for? And the final one is KPI, key performance indicators. So this is a measurable metric that you have as a business to understand how you're doing, and you actually use that as your measure of success. Today we're going to go through 3 key takeaways, which are essentially key points of understanding data in your business that actually then impact all your business data and loop into part of your sales data. So it's really good to understand different measurements or metrics that you want to capture in different areas of your business. There is so much data you can get, and sometimes there can be data overwhelm. So these are basically the core grit data that you want to know, and then how you can actually keep track of it as part of your whole cycle of your business data. So the first one, number 1, is operational efficiency data. So this is what I would actually call keeping the lights on. So what do you pay as an outcost for just having your business open? So for example, in the UK, you would potentially have to pay for company's house, you have to submit annual tax returns, your annual accounts, you may be paying for your software costs for your email, there may be certain things you're paying for suppliers. If you have a physical space, you may be paying for renting that space, physically keeping the lights on, so paying the electricity bill. These are all your operational costs. So without any sales, without anything to promote your business, what are you paying out as your costs? This is always a good one to kind of review and optimize regularly to understand if you're being efficient. So personally, for me, I probably do this review every 6 months or so and go through what are our operational costs, our keeping the lights on costs, down to software, people, how we're doing things, time management. So really understanding everyone's use of time as well. And this is by having that understanding of your overheads, so your operational costs, you're keeping the lights on. When you have a sale, that has to be deducted as your first cost, right? So an example of how this can impact your sales data or your profit margins is you may have a business with really good sales, but if you have high operational costs, this will eat into your profit margin. So for example, if you're paying rent in a really expensive area to have a certain postcode or location, but actually what you're charging for your services or your product isn't relative to that, you could quite quickly eat up any profit and any cash reserves, because you're essentially paying to be flashy, but you're not getting the flash back from the customers. So this is something, as I said, look at optimizing internal processes and reducing any overhead costs, and this will then boost your profitability and improve efficiencies for keeping the lights on, operational costs. The next one is number 2, marketing effectiveness. So I've said this before and I'll say it again. Even if you're doing free marketing, okay, so email marketing, social media, you're doing blog content, whatever it is, that still has a cost. That cost is time, and that is someone's time to produce all that content. That needs to be taken into consideration. Then you want to think about things like your cost per acquisition. So for all your marketing efforts, how much is it costing you to get a person into your business, whether it's a product or service, physically walk into your store? You want to know that this person who's come into your store, this person who's clicked buy now online has come from that Facebook post here, or they've come from that press release we did there. Whatever it is, that's understanding your cost per acquisition. And again, this is where quite easy you can basically bleed money, because if you're not tracking this and you're just knowing things are going well but not really understanding where it's coming from, what's happening, you'll just keep doing a lot of stuff. Or another stereotypical example is a lot of people will spend so much money on paid for media thinking that's the only way you can get in customers, but actually you might get in a customer and they're not returning customers, and you're paying that acquisition cost, that high acquisition cost every time on paid media, rather than building your community, optimizing your retention strategy. And I think one thing that is a kind of a misconception within a misconception is that a lot of times paid media can have a higher acquisition cost than organic social media, organic website, etc. But it's because you get that instant from paid media that people think it's a better route. So again, this is something to really review your conversion rates, your cost per lead, your cost per acquisition. And honestly, on this one, I would actually say do it on a monthly basis. So I've said this before, and even if you're a small business owner and you don't want to do a whole big report, just by taking that couple of hours a month to review what your spend is, or what time you're spending on creating your marketing content, and thinking, okay, so what do we get as our back from it, your return on investment? I should have included that as another acronym, so I'll put that in the notes too. But you really want to understand what was worthwhile, what you would do again. And again, this is something where you could be reviewing and saying, okay, is it time to be outsourcing this because it's taking too much time in-house? We have profit and we have budget to actually outsource this so we can then scale it. And number 3 is customer retention data. So this again is where you want to look at your reviews, your feedback, your loyalty schemes, or your refer a friends, word of mouth. This is really understanding the data about how your customers interact with you and what they do next. Yes, you've got the sale, so they've bought your product, they've bought your service, your subscription, or they've come into your restaurant and they've eaten, but would they come again? Would they refer you? And again, we've covered this off before about how to do retention strategies, which I will link in the show notes. But this is really understanding how you can get repeat purchases. What's the customer lifetime value? How can you get that customer to buy more from you? Or how can you get that customer to refer more for you? So for this one, really, you want to be reviewing this probably quarterly to understand the behavior of customers. And this may be because it takes a longer time for you to actually get from a lead to a sale. It depends on your lead time, depending on your product or your service, your industry, etc. This could be anywhere from, okay, you launch an ad and then you get a lead and a conversion within a week, or actually sometimes it can take 6 months. So understanding that and then reviewing the data, probably the length of time it takes to get customers. So if it takes you 6 months to get customers, I would say review the customer retention data probably every 6 months then, because it'll change intermittently then, and it'll take a lot longer to see any impacts. And I suppose the final bonus piece is understanding your burn rate and cash flow. So as I said in the beginning, if you're a medium business, again, the perception would be that you're cash positive, that you're profitable, and that everything's swimmingly. Well, I'm here to tell you that that is not always the case. And also it's understanding how markets can fluctuate and industries can change, trends can change. You think of how quick industries can change based on how technology is developing nowadays. Or if you're in hospitality, how many more competitors and pop-ups may happen around you based on your location. Or like no one knew COVID was going to happen. So what's your cash reserves? Again, going back to your keeping your lights on. So if you have employees, how long can you afford to pay employees with no sales? How long can you afford to pay your rent with no sales? I think that's always good to understand what's your backup. So this goes into your burn rate. And the reason why I say this is stereotypically not used in a medium or large organization is because as a startup, it's like the everyday language about the burn rate. You know, how many months we have to live, what's our burn rate in terms of percentage that we're using our cash reserves, because they've typically gone through rounds of funding, they have investors, there's a lot more people they're reporting to as a startup. And then when you go into the bigger organizations, yes, this is a responsibility of the C-suite to be monitoring this, but actually it doesn't harm for more people to be aware of that situation. So it's really important to review each of those different areas and also have a team linking up. So like I said, yes, sales is getting the sales, and it may be one person doing the sales or it may be a whole team of sales, but actually the efficiencies of understanding your business data and how it all impacts together is the whole part of the story. So just on that, monitoring burn rate will actually then allow you to adjust your spending and typically will help you reduce costs before the cash runs out. And so it doesn't really matter what size business you are. This is really important to understand as part of your data. So if anything, of all, I suppose, the data points that you can tap into, it's understanding how much money is left in the bank account, which is essentially how it comes down to your burn rate. So as a wrap up, sales data is obviously one piece of the puzzle, and there is so many more points to be involved, making better business decisions around your data and actually understanding the different data points that impact that sale. And all of these need to come together to essentially help you scale the business and grow and get more sales and be more profitable. But thank you for joining me for another episode of Engage and Thrive with your host Taelon, and see you next week.